Hello, good afternoon. I'm Father Alexander. This is St. Peter's in Hove, and welcome. The time has come for us to talk about Samson, and I have to warn you right now, it's not going to be easy. Samson has 3 chapters, all to himself, roughly, in the book of Judges, starting with chapter 13. Now, Samson is very, very unusual in the Bible. I mean, he really does stand out. First of all, he has certain mythical qualities about him. He's like Hercules, he's of enormous strength, and his enormous strength can be tamed by cutting off his hair. So his enormous strength is not a natural gift, it's a supernatural gift. It's a bit like one of the legends we read about of the ancient Greeks. So he's almost a magical figure. Now, I'm not saying he's a real figure, he was a historical figure, but clearly there have been bits that have been added to this story. It's been embroidered. Samson is, as has been rightly said, the Jewish Hercules. And like Hercules, he is overcome by the trick of a woman. Hercules was undone by his wife. Samson is undone by his wife. Interesting. So that's the first thing about Samson. He's the first man we meet in the Bible who has got supernatural qualities. Not miraculous qualities, supernatural qualities, because they're all physical qualities. The second thing that's really difficult about Samson to get your head around is this. Morally, he has no good qualities whatsoever. Now, am I saying Samson is immoral? No, I'm not. What I'd rather say, as will later appear, I hope, in subsequent episodes, Samson is amoral. He stands outside any possible moral code. Other people obey rules, but not Samson. Samson, it's not that he's a rule breaker, rather Samson is somebody who just doesn't acknowledge that there are such things as rules. He's amoral. And thirdly, despite this, he's a judge of Israel, somebody appointed by the Lord. And despite this, he is a hero for the children of Israel, as we'll see. Now, if we look at chapter 13, this enigmatic, strange figure is born to a woman who is infertile, who is barren, and his birth is announced by an angel. The angel doesn't reveal his name. Not only does the angel come to the woman and tell her she's going to have a child, and that this child is going to be a very special child, then the angel comes back because the father, Manoah, wants to know more and speaks to the woman again, then speaks to Manoah. So it's a double annunciation, if you like. Now, does this sound familiar? Well, it should do, because there's a double annunciation in St. Luke's Gospel in the opening 2 chapters. The angel Gabriel goes first to Zechariah, and then he goes to Mary. So, but it's to 2 different people. So it announces the birth of John the Baptist, and saying that he is going to be the forerunner of the Messiah. And then he goes to Mary and announces the birth of the Messiah and mentions the birth of the forerunner, John the Baptist. So that's the only example I can think of in the Bible where an angel comes back a second time, although even there it's not really a parallel because it's to 2 different people. But here the angel comes back twice. The angel also says that Samson is to be a Nazarite from his mother's birth. That is to say, he is to be specially consecrated to God. Not only must she not have any alcohol, he must never have a drink in his life, and also he must never cut his hair. No razor may go near his head. That means also he mustn't shave his beard. So Samson must have been an appalling sight. He would have looked like a haystack. Samson is a bit of a monster, I think. Yeah. Anyway, then of course they say the angel of the Lord is to Manoah just a man of God. He is some sort of messenger. That's all that the angel means. And Manoah then offers this angel, this man, something to eat. I'll go and get a kid for you, and so on and so forth, just as Abraham did with the 3 angels at the oak of Mamre. So Manoah marks himself out as a fine Israelite, a good man who offers his hospitality to the stranger, as is laid down not only in the law of Moses, but in the law of the desert, if you like, the law that binds all people who live in desert conditions. But he says he can't eat it, and he says make it into a sacrifice to the Lord instead. He burns it, and the angel disappears to God, going up in the flame. And the old couple, we assume they're old, Manoah and his wife, throw themselves on the ground, saying, now we've seen God. Surely we must die. And she says, don't be silly. If he'd wanted to kill us, he would have done so some other way. He would not have accepted a burnt offering, an oblation for us. He would not have let us see all this at the same time, have told us such things. He's made us a promise. He's not going to kill us. Don't be ridiculous. And so Samson is born 9 months later. It's an extraordinary story. Now, what's the point of the story of the double and angelic annunciation? Well, I mean, first of all, I think it shows that the person writing about Samson clearly thinks Samson is the most extraordinary person who's ever lived, if you like. Because after all, Isaac's birth was foretold by the angels, wasn't it? And Isaac is very important because he represents the one chance of continuity for the people of Israel. But I mean, Jacob's children, other people's children, were not foretold by an angel. So the fact that the angel foretells the birth of Samson shows that Samson is a prodigy. Samson is a very, very, very special person. And of course, the Israelites at this time are oppressed by the Philistines. And therefore, it will take an extraordinary man of the most extraordinary natural gifts to lead the Israelites against the Philistines. So of all the enemies that the Israelites have had oppressing them, the Amorites, the Midianites, the Philistines, I think the implication is clear, are easily the worst, the absolute worst. Also, it's worth noting that the Philistines are the last people to oppress the Israelites until you get really up to the Romans, I suppose. Because the Philistines are dealt with once and for all by King David. So the Philistines are the last oppression the Israelites have, and also their worst oppression. Now, because they're the last oppression, they're the most recent in the memory, and therefore they're seen as the worst. I mean, who cares about the Midianites and the Amorites? We've forgotten about them. But the Philistines, we can remember. So, for example, Britain was been at war with Denmark 1,000 years ago, wasn't it? You know, the Danes were the national enemy. We don't think that now. Danes are enemies? Nobody would think that. But our more recent enemies, that's different. We were at war with Russia in the 1850s, but we've forgotten about that. It's only the more recent wars that we remember. So the Philistines, as an existential threat to the existence of Israel, obviously have a great deal of resonance. Therefore, you have this biblical superhero who is going to drive out the Philistines. But as I say, he's a superhero, but he's by no means admirable. In fact, he's terrifying, and he is by no means moral, and he's by no means whatsoever good, as we will discover. Yet he's totally dedicated to the Lord, so it's a bit hard to get your head round. One of the things, of course, that you pick up the Bible, and you hope that the Bible will edify you. It'll give you wonderful examples of human behavior. Actually, quite often you pick up the Bible, not quite often, but from time to time you pick up the Bible and you're faced with the paradox. And the paradox is simply this, that God can use all sorts of very questionable people to bring about his will. Getting rid of the Philistines, God will use Samson. Samson, as I said, is a bit of a monster, but God can make use even of people like Samson. Okay, we'll hear more about Samson later. In fact, we've got, I think, at least 2 more episodes to do on Samson. He gets a lot of coverage in the book of Judges, so he must have been thought very important by our ancient Israelite brethren. All the best. Bye.